I'd like to welcome you all to today's Warrant Officer Leader Professional Development Session. Like I said, my name is CW3 Louis Gonzalez. I'm the Senior Tech here at the mighty 7ID G6. And on behalf of our G6 family, we would like to thank everyone for dialing in. Do these WOPD sessions kind of as an olive branch and build a esprit de corps with all our Signal Warrant Officers. And of course, we'd want to open them up for the masses. As far as an intro for Chief, y'all get his emails. You guys know who he is, so he's taking the time to share his insight on all the various initiatives that are going on at DISA, which affect every single one of us. As technicians, we receive these updates from him on everything that's going on at DISA, and today he's going to provide some solid information for us. So please just send us the questions in that same group chat, and then we'll go ahead and tee it off. So without further ado, Chief, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Hey, thanks, sir. Hey, brothers and sisters, just a quick intro. So been a warrant for a little bit. I am a junior W5, but I act in a different capacity. My assignments currently, at DISA, but it's been joint for my whole time, basically, other than 1 year at Fort Gordon, sitting at CDID. And Tickham G&E back in the 2013, 2014 timeframe. Other than that, it has been 100% joint assignment, supporting joint forces from 2003 to today. So with that in mind, a lot of my focus will be joint oriented and not as much Army oriented, but it has relevance because it's not necessarily the Army wins the fight, it's the joint force combatant commands that actually execute the mission. So in that, we have collectively between the 7th ID, G6, and myself posted the slides that I'll go over today. I'm not sure if they're going to push them here, but they are in the chat already. If you scroll to the top, the slides are there. There's 7 of them. They are just to talk off of and not necessarily to go into great detail. So if you have them, great. If you don't, really, the first slide just goes over talking about what DISA is and what DISA is not, and making the distinction between DISA as an agency and JFHQ DODN as a command. DISA is here as a combat support agency. We build, operate, and secure the global infrastructure. The foundational infrastructure, as you know it, it's finite in what we do, defined, and the courses are accounted for. The case for Joint Force Headquarters DODN, they are a command and control element. Their focus on life is not only to oversee what DISA is doing from an operational and protection perspective, but also oversee what everybody else from an infrastructure across the DODN, that's the services, agencies, combatant commands, you name it, do across the world. So I'll pause right there if there's any questions in reference to DISA and JFHQ DODNs and the mission set. Okay, nothing else. The next slide that's in the deck is basically the DISA global presence. We are deployed globally throughout all major combatant commands. And at the same time, we have DISA, what you would know as DISA decks, that house the infrastructure for the Tier 0 and Tier 1 links globally, and also the data centers. We have presence from South Korea all the way to Kabul, Afghanistan, primaries in support of the combatant commanders. We have major organizations that are not only providing independent operations, but also integrated with the J6 staffs of the combatant commands. So to understand that, the main headquarters for DISA is here at Fort Meade. That is the headquarters. The Army's interaction for the most part with DISA is DISA Global. DISA Global is located at Scott Air Force Base, and that is where if you think of you've got a problem in the Army, you work local on your installation, what have you. open up your tickets, it routes to RCC. RCC then clears in-house from an Army perspective, and then the Army will route that ticket to the Global Service Desk and DISA Global, where DISA will then start to try to figure out at that point in time, is the problem somewhere within inside the DISN? And that is the heart and soul of DISA from an operational ops perspective, sits at DISA Global at Scott Air Force Base. I'll pause just if there are any questions in reference to that. Okay, I hear nothing, so I'm going to assume thumbs up in the chat or something that everybody's alive. All right, at least Chris Colt's up. Got it. Thanks, Corey. Okay, slide 3. So this is one of the meat slides that I want to go over that I can probably pretty much explain DISA and what we're doing from a global perspective. So the DISA infrastructure provided by DISA supports more than just the DoD. So just in context, we are the enterprise service provider for the DoD, but DISA also supports more than just the DoD. We support other federal agencies and the U.S. government as a whole, just for context. So I'll move from left to right on the slide, not going into great detail, but just so you understand from a bandwidth perspective of what we're working on in the backbone aspect of it. So our bandwidth sits around 15 to 17 terabytes per second from a bandwidth perspective on the backbone. So when you think and you say, hey, the bandwidth, it sucks, it's slow, it's not working, I can tell you from a bandwidth perspective on the backbone, that's not the problem. The problem isn't getting out to the caps or anything else. The problem is somewhere between the end user and getting to the tier 0 infrastructure. And there are many things in between those two areas, and there can be a lot of issues. Going on to the next piece, DISA controls over 39,000 miles of optical fiber connecting the core backbone for the entire globe. Over 28 or 22,000 circuits that are controlled by DISA. This does not take into account the circuits that are controlled individually by the services. And use the Army as the example. The Army controls some of their circuits internal to themselves, and that would be the internal connections between post camps and stations that probably are not, and more than likely are not, controlled by DISA as an entity. But we control 22,000+ different circuits across the board. We house 10 of the 22, as of today, it's 22 IAPs, Internet Access Points, for the DoD. The next closest organization to control or operate an IAP is NSA, and they only operate 2. So we operate 8 more than NSA does. All traffic from the Army to the internet flows out the IAPs unless it's web traffic and you are behind CBII, cloud-based internet isolation. At that point in time, we move from, it goes out a side door out to a cloud service provider, and then you route out. I can tell you the DISA footprint is 100% behind CBI. The Army through NETCOM is working the plan for deployment of CBI to all installations and organizations. There's a JFHQ DODIN order designating that the entirety of the DODIN on unclass must be behind CBI no later than one of the quarters in FY23. I think the Army is supposed to get up to 40% this FY. But NetCom has the plan, or working through the plan right now for deployment internal to the Army. I can tell you it works. My access, it has not broken anything from a video perspective, accessing web pages or anything else, from the configurations in which DISA is behind their portion of that. If it breaks right now for any of the Army personnel that are behind it, the Army NetCom does have control of their piece of it, and they can set their settings. So it might not be a DISA issue. It could be a setting that's set inside the Army tenant. And when I say tenant, it's not the Office 365 tenant stuff. It is the CBI tenant, which NetCom controls. The IAPs are, and I'm going to say gold standard, but of the other 10 that are not NSA or DISA, they do not have the same capabilities that DISA nor NSA has inside their IAPs across the board. DISA also controls the six airborne ISR locations around the globe for all the tactical and or strategic ISR, and which you'd watch through UVDS. That is inside our portfolio. DISA has 51 satellite gateways, and we can land anything you have. As long as you can see the bird, we can land you. We cover every band from a frequency perspective. We have 9 mobility gateways hosted globally between unclassed and classified. Classified, we are working right now to expand the footprint classified-wise to OCONUS, somewhere in the Pacific and European theater. Locations to be determined where those will be at, but that will be part of our global gray infrastructure once we land that. We will start to combine some of the different gateways. Basically, we're combining the CSFC gateways that are out there today and the mobility gateways that are out there today, so it becomes a singular gateway with that. The unclassified gateways will probably change in the future as we are moving more and more data into the cloud. We will probably not, when I say into the cloud, into the IL5 environment. We will probably move the gateways into the IL5 environment, so you will not have to come all the way back in from a termination standpoint into the DODN or DISN, and then route back out to the IL5 commercial world to get to the data. So more to follow on that, and I'm sure I know DISA is what they're planning, but I think NetCom is also looking at some different things, and I won't speak on behalf of it, but it's something to think about as you move data from internal hosting to external. Think where the user has to get to from a data perspective. We'll stop right there. I see one question. How can, as a network engineer, improve strategic links at our installations to connect to the DISA fiber backbone? Are DISA airborne ISR assets available to conventional Army forces? So I'll tackle the first one in reference to network engineers improve their strategic links. So I would highly suggest you work with inside NetCom and the G6. I was just in a meeting yesterday. It was yesterday with General Morrison. So the Army is strategically looking, I think, going to be led in the G6 with support from NetCom for circuit re-architecture across the board for the entire Army. Right now, just the cost in which the Army pays for circuits is astronomical, and again, it's because of all the installations and everything else that are there. With that in mind, I don't have anything. The meeting has just started last Friday. It's going to be every week between a Tiger team between the Army and DISA. If I get any more fidelity, I'll post it to the chat here in the next couple of days. That way, you can get groundswell from ground up to get into some of the conversations in which you're asking about how can you connect to the DISA fiber backbone for greater bandwidth. DISA Airborne ISR available to conventional Army forces. Yes, the UDVS, all that is accessible by anyone with access to SIPR. Anyone can access that 100%. Most JTFs and or task force pump their feeds into UDVS for global broadcasting. So no matter where you are in the world, you can see any of the ISR assets, the 200 plus that are flying daily. I'm going to pause right here. I got one thing, just because we have a lot of junior personnel on here. It was been brought to my attention that, hey, talk about how I came up to the senior tech for DISA. So I will tell you, take the hard assignments first, foremost, and always. Never back down from those. I will tell you that my first assignment was by chance. There's a lot of luck that goes into it, but there's a lot of things you can do at the same time. I was in WOBC myself, and some of you may know a retired warrant, West Postal. We were both in WOBC. Retired CW5 Andy Barr came down to our class and said, hey, who wants to go to 75th Ranger Regiment, 2nd Ranger Battalion? I was not airborne qualified at the time. Wes was. He was a prior enlisted inside 375. At that point in time, we both raised our hand. So Andy submitted both mine and Wes's name into USASOC G1 for the W5 there, and literally my fate to become my first assignment was dictated by the flip of a coin. It was, and I didn't find this out till later, but it was flip the coin, heads, Taylor goes to 275, tails, West goes to 275. So it landed heads, and that's how I was selected to at least assess to go to 275. It was all volunteer, went through the program at 75th, went to 275, sat there for 3 years, and then moved to 75th Ranger Regiment down at the headquarters at Fort Benning for another 7. So in the first 10 years as a warrant, I sat within the 75th Ranger Regiment formation between a battalion and a headquarters, with 17 combat deployments. So for those 10 years, I was continuously deployed, and it was around the clock. There was no time off across the board. After that, I spent 1 year at Fort Gordon, and then it was, who wants to go to CENTCOM J6? There's a job opening as a W4. I interviewed for the job against the other W5s, and I was selected across other W5s for that position. And the reason why I found out later, it was because I had the operational mindset. I wasn't stuck in just the technical. I took commander's intent, turned commander's intent into action, and then executed. I always ask for forgiveness after the fact, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but all survivable. During CENTCOM, I was chosen to and selected to be the second DISA senior technical advisor behind CW5 retired Bill Winkler. And I've been here right at 3 years now at DISA, work directly for the DISA director, which is dual-hatted as also the JFHQ Dogan commander, currently Lieutenant General Skinner from the Air Force. And again, it's operationally focused, technical, but at the same time, what does it do operationally? So when you're looking at assignments, and I know the assignments process has changed, but use the system to your advantage. Network amongst your peers and or seniors. Make yourself known. If you're not known, your resume will not just speak for itself. Just trust me on that. But at that point, enough for that. I'd like to get back to the technical and the meat and potatoes. Unless there are questions in reference to that, I'm all ears. I'll pause.
Hey, Chief, you have a question from CW4 Culp.
Yep, go ahead. Is it in the chat? Okay,
Yeah, it's in the chat.
Manipulating Culp. Yep. Developing Sabre or any of them move for SIPR to SecRel. Okay, so funny you should ask that, Chris. Right, so part of yesterday's conversation with General Morrison, understanding the Army is moving in that direction very fast. The G6, he did ask for DISA to be part of the team to help reshape and structure and architect, engineer the best solution on the classified side for the Army. I don't know if Danny's on here from the G6. I know he's been on leave. I don't know if he's made it back in or if he's got tied up. But I have not sat with Danny to talk about this and the G6 and where the Army is going. I see everything that the G357 sends out. I'll be honest with you. I read some of it. I don't read it all. I've got a folder for G357. If I ever come back into the Army footprint, I've got a lot of reading and catch up to do. But I will tell you that the Army does have DISA's commitment to help shape and inform the Army where the best to go in reference to the SecRel environment. I spent 4 years in the SecRel environment in CENTCOM. I know it very well with the shift of SecRel and MPE from DISA as a program over to the Air Force as the program 2 years ago. I have not stayed as tied in, but it's not about the network. It's about the information that's inside the network and how do you control that information down to the data layer. Because once you get to the SecRel, and I helped build for those that hit the CENTCOM AOR, and some of my information is dated only because I've been out of CENTCOM for a couple of years, but CPNX, that is a multi-SecRel environment with multiple caveats in the same network. It was over 54, I think 54, maybe different countries, part of that team for CJTF OIR. But some of my information is dated. I've been out of that realm for a quick minute. Chris, does that help answer some of that?
Yeah, no, I already knew the answers. Like I said, stimulating conversation, right?
Okay. I mean, if anybody else has any questions with that, I mean, I know the Army Futures Command of the Network CFT has been working towards that a lot. When I first got to DISA, we were working on that with them. So I just don't have any other updated information of where the senior levels of the Army are currently at with those type of decisions and or deployments. Yeah, so the question referenced how is DISA postured to enable joint JADC2, joint all domain command and control? Can our Army agendas be met using C2 structure change to supplement costs and resources? So DISA is a major player in JADC2. That portfolio falls underneath our services directorate. And we are tied lockstep with the joint staff right now. Let's see. Can our Army agendas be met with the C2? I think this is going to be a change. JADC2. I think everybody's wanted to get there in the past. I think it's going to be a change for some old timers and new individuals of how you do business and how you consume information. I truly look forward to JADC2. I mean, growing up in SOF, I'm not saying we did it by any means underneath the umbrella in which I worked, but we were pretty darn close to how information was fed throughout the stack to get to shooter on target. Let's see. Does DISA have a proxy solution for small teams operated in blacklisted countries? Can you expound on that? Hey, Damien, can you expound on that?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Yeah, so what we have is teams that's out operating in hotels that heading back to stateside trying to VPN back or IVPN back. It's getting blocked. But if they're able to come back, they can put that specific IP address in, but because the hotel is on DHCP, it's every 2 days you probably have to call back to get this IP enabled. So what we have been doing is creating our own proxy server, but kind of like a Band-Aid fix to it so far, and that's able us to get IVPN back and not causing any issues. But I'm just trying to see if there's a DISA solution that's able to.
Yeah, we do have some things in the kit bag. So I'll ask, hey, Damien, can you send that to me in email, and then I'll get it back out to the greater force once I get the detailed information, because it's more than you that just have that issue. We've seen it across the board for the countries that block certain traffic. No issues.
Okay, Roger. Track.
All right. So I left off on slide 3, and that's pretty much from left to right across the board on slide 3. Is there any other questions on slide 3 that anybody might have? Okay, so just on that, what I'll say is DISA has its hands in just about everything there is that's out there, from the layer 1 through 7. DISA's involved some way, somehow. There's not an operation with ISR and killing a bad guy that DISA is not involved in that somewhere within inside the agency. No matter where it's happening inside the combatant command and or operation, we have a piece of that. Hey, Isaac, I see the GI IP blocks that you put in there. There is some ways to get around it, and when Damien sends it, I can get it back out to the group. So thank Isaac. All right, so I want to move to slide 4 and 5, and that's just to give you just a brief overview of where we are, CONUS and OCONUS, with upgrades across the DISN Tier 0, Tier 1 connections that DISA controls of the optical transport, taking all the links to 100 gigs between the organizations, between the locations. So we're in the process of upgrading all the DISA controlled circuits and links to ensure that they're all 100 gig between. Any questions in reference to what's CONUS and or OCONUS from a Germany perspective? And we're doing the same thing in PAC. I just didn't have the slide for INDOPACOM and or CENTCOM. Okay. So the last 2 slides basically go over the hot button inside the Army. I know right now is the transition from an Office 365 perspective. I watch the Facebook groups. I watch it all, see all the talks and that kind of stuff. I am going to speak from the department level, and we'll touch very briefly on the Army and what I know right now from an Army perspective. The guidance from the Army is and or should be coming out of the G6 to all locations in reference to the Army 365 migration perspective. So in the grand scheme of things, Office 365, or better yet, known by the department as DoD 365. So there's an umbrella. So the DoD CIO has said, hey, DoD 365 consists of the umbrella of Office 365 for the department. Inside the department right now, I have counted 14 separate tenants. I've heard the number 17, but I've seen 14 tenants. And that is between a couple of different agencies, one of the COCOMs, the services, and DISA has a tenant inside of the tenant architecture. I am tracking right now the Army has the following tenants. The ETAS tenant, which is the Netcom Microsoft, that is the final landing place for the Army, in which the G6 and CIO of the Army made that decision a couple weeks ago. And that is where everybody is being migrated to and will land finally from an Army perspective. I think everybody currently right now is in what's called the AT&T or PEO EIS UC tenant. It's been there for quite a long time, and that's where they were moving to, but the Army made a decision to turn 180 degrees and actually utilize a different tenant that the Army had control over. Another tenant that's inside the Army, which has been there for quite some time, is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which is subordinate to the Army, but it is a very mature tenant inside the Office 365 space. With that being said, the tenants all take guidance from the DoD CIO from a configuration perspective. So there's something called tenant configuration guides. Basically, what you know of today as STIGs, it's basically the STIG for the tenants. All tenants have to adhere to those tenant configuration guides, and there are no waivers for the configurations inside those guides. Those guides are there. Those guides are controlled by DoD CIO at this point in time and US Cybercom. The reason why they're so tightly controlled is the way that the Department of Defense's or the IL5 environment and how we receive traffic from Microsoft and our connections. The Microsoft's connection is at the top level right now of all the IL5 environment. So if they open it up to allow traffic through from the commercial internet and from your local personal computers and that type of stuff, all tenants then have access. And if they're not configured correctly, it causes big holes and tremendous cybersecurity risks for the IL5 environment. Because once you're in, right? And that's the problem. So there are teams that are part of Netcom and Microsoft staff for the Army that are working hand in hand with teams from DISA, from the Navy, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, U.S. Coast Guard, DLA, DHA, and a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They are the ones that are controlling the security configurations for that tenant or for the tenants. And there's a lot of things that are going in. The first thing that they had to do were put in a whole bunch of blocks at the tenant level, so Microsoft is able to open up the door to the internet. But before Microsoft could do that, all the blocks had to be in at the tenant level to ensure that even though they can get in the Microsoft framework, they can't get into the tenant infrastructure itself. So that's ongoing right now. I think they're right at 75 to 80% done with it right now. What does that mean? That means when they are done, you will have access and the notion of what some of you may have heard, flow 3. So let me explain what flow 3 is. But before you understand what flow 3 is, you have to understand what flow 1 and flow 2 are. So flow 1 is me today. I'm in my office on Fort Meade in DISA headquarters on the local land. So equate that to anyone else that's on an installation that's on your local land. That is flow 1. Flow 2, some of you possibly are at home right now and are VPN'd back into your DoD A infrastructure. Once you're VPN'd in, yes, you are inside the DoD, but you're coming from commercial through a VPN. That is flow 2. Flow 3 would be some of you that are out there today on your personal devices connected to the IL2 environment with no VPN or anything else. Flow 3 will be the same thing from your personal device, whether it's your iOS, Android, Windows, Linux, whatever, and yes, an app and a MacBook or whatever, directly into the IL5 tenant location where the data is, basically the Army's tenant to access your data. The initial piece of that will be OWA only. I won't say OWA, it will be web-based only. I don't want to say OWA, web-based only, and that's web-based for mail, web-based for Teams, web-based for SharePoint, and web-based for OneDrive. The blocks will be in that any work that is done within that in a Flow 3 connected device is all web-based. There will be no downloading of information to that local device. I'll break right there for any questions. All right, guys, just I want to pause right here. If there's anybody else who wants to say something, my boss is at the door.
Yeah, this is Chief Bird. I was just going to add it. So I was moved over to the Army 365 yesterday, and I started testing with other tenants such as DoD. And what I found out is that, so if you are added to a group or a team in another tenant, you're actually going to be a guest on that tenant. And you're also, it's not seamless because you're going to end up showing two screens and you're going to have to swap back and forth depending on what tenant you're in. Like right now, if I'm looking at I'm actually working on it. I'm in my Army 365 tenant. But if I need to see about a meeting or something in the DoD, there's a drop down up by my profile and I have to go to the DISA tenant. So you're not underneath one screen showing both DISA and Army teams that you've been added to. So I don't know, Taylor, if that's what you see. I'm using web browser, so I don't know if there's a difference between web browser and app, but it's a little difficult for me, it was easy, because I'm Signal. But if you get somebody out there that's not sure what they're doing, and trying to bounce back and forth and trying to because I don't have a calendar when I'm looking at my DISA tenant either.
Yeah.
So if I was added to a meeting, I have no clue.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a little bit difficult when we transition over.
So it is. It's a learning curve, and so 7ID I'm hijacking this a little bit. So I'm a show and tell kind of person, and to show exactly what you're talking about. So if you look at it, you should be able to see what Charles is talking about in reference to the drop down. I'm part of the U.S. Marine Corps as a guest and DISA. So if I want to go to the Marine Corps, there's something in the Marine Corps that somebody sent me, I see it, I actually have to do that to get to it. And it will take me out of the Teams environment that I am in for my tenant and move me into the other U.S. Marine Corps tenant. And I haven't connected with Charles yet, but Charles, I would like to connect with you since I don't have anybody inside the Army tenant right this second. Does that help?
Yeah, I'll get together with you and we'll work it, and then that way you can, add me in yours. Over.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so the cross-tenant collaboration in which we are going to have, it's going to be a work in progress. You have to understand that what you know today inside of Teams is not going to be the same when you get to the IL5 environment. The reason behind that is the IL2 environment is all commercial based. The IL5 is commercial, but it has to be ported over from the commercial by Microsoft. So it's not that DISA is stopping anything. Microsoft has to do that piece to get it inside the environment to actually be utilized. So slide 6 starts to look at some of that in reference to that. One thing that is there, I can tell you from a DoD 365 joint tenant perspective, is audio conferencing. So right now, our tenant has the ability, just like in the IL2 environment, we have phone numbers that are assigned to individuals. It's all license based, and you just call. You just call into the meetings, no issue. So that is already set up. We have the audio conferencing bridges set. It is my belief, and somebody in the Army, please correct me. Please correct me if I'm wrong. The Army has that or will have that through one of their contracts, but they're going to come onto our contract to get buying power across the department. I know the Air Force and Marine Corps and the Navy are jumping behind us and will be that connection tissue. But I do know the Army tenant, the new Army tenant, if it doesn't already have it in it, it will have it in it pretty quick.
You're talking about the conference lines or the BL for
the
outside the call in?
Yep.
Right. They got, so, we had 11,000 licenses in the AT&T tenant.
Mhm.
And so when we transferred over to the Netcom, they said no, yet that they were going to work on a different process to get them. And so, yes, you're right. So I don't know exactly, they haven't put out guidance yet exactly on it, but yes, they will be getting them. And it's going to issue those, it's going to be a different process than it was, because what they did with CVR, they just, when they transferred over to the AT&T, if you had it in CVR, they just gave it to you in the AT&T, but now they've just got rid of it altogether. And then when we get over to the Army 365, they're going to have TTPs to request them. And I don't know how they're getting them, but yes.
Yeah.
Over.
Correct. And you're right, Charles. So the Army, their second process, if I'm not mistaken, will utilize the DISA's connection to get those audio conference. But once the Army has them, they'll do their individual issuing to the Army customers that request them. Just so you know, I may have and I'll use an example. Say I've got, and I don't have this by any means, but say I've got a staff that works for me. The license would be applied to me for the position, but my staff doesn't have to have audio conferencing. They can utilize mine even in their calendar invites and everything else when they create the meetings. We have cracked that nut from a TTP perspective, how we can create meetings on behalf of and take their license and use their phone number. So I just got to get it in writing, and I can share that with the Army so you guys can do the same thing inside your tenant. All right, I'm going to go to slide 7 because that's really where a lot of things are changing on behalf of the department. It is not a turnkey solution. Once you get in, there will be growing pains across the board. The department has sprinted to a finish line, and at the same time, their shoelaces have been untied the whole time they're trying to get there. I.e., the Army made their decision to change in the 9th inning with 2 outs, bases loaded, and a full count. They switched tenants, and they need 5 runs, so the grand slam won't win the game, right? So there's going to be growing pains. Just you have to articulate that to your bosses and across the board. We in DISA are having to do the same thing for everybody that we're supporting, all the way up to the SecDef. So we are supporting the SecDef, Joint Chairman and Chiefs of Staff, all the OSD staff inside the Pentagon, all the 3-letter agencies, and everybody else that's out there that is not in the IC community. So I can attest that it is all about messaging and how you sell it to your bosses and or your staff. Some of the capabilities that we've done internal to ourselves we are a customer of ourselves. So we have transitioned in, of Mill Drive, and if you haven't heard of Mill Drive, it was basically like OneDrive or Google Drive or whatever. It's a DISA service. We are sunsetting that because everybody's getting into the Office 365 space. There's no need for Mill Drive, no need to spend the money. We have transitioned all our personal files or X drives or home drives or whatever else you want to call them. Everybody as of tomorrow, 100% inside our agency loses Mill Drive, and they are all using OneDrive. So think about your installations, how much money you're paying to your NECs for storage and everything else. You have that 100% inside of OneDrive, team sites, and site collections inside of SharePoint. We are transitioning away from the old type of storage and everything into the Office 365 environment, and it works, right? Our business processes, we have worked internal ourselves, and you all have to do that individually, how you're going to do that. So it does work, absolutely, no doubt about it. Because each individual will have 1 terabyte of storage just for personal files, and then email will go to 100 gig mailbox. Any questions on that? All right, so each tenant owner will have to configure their different applications internal to their tenant. I know Power BI is one of the big ones. I believe the Army is configuring it for their tenant. I know we have it set up in ours already, so we have Power BI, no issue. That's already available inside the tenant architectures right now. In June timeframe, no later than June timeframe, the department is hoping and praying that we get the TCG 2 piece of it done to enable the web browser access from personal devices. Other MS applications that should come in the June timeframe to the IL5 environment will be the whiteboard function, My Analytics, To Do, live events, recording of transcripts, rights management services, RMS/AIP, Power Automate, and Power Apps. And then from a larger Army perspective, from a licensing perspective, I think the Army currently right now has bought everything through a JELA contract or through their other contract. It is all moving to the DOS program office from a purchasing power perspective, just from a licensing. And no one inside the Army that's on this call should care about that. It's just for common knowledge, just so you know. That'll be done at a larger level for the licenses. And then in the future, in the next 12 to 18, more closer to the 18 months, SIPR IL5 will be there. The department's already signed the memorandum that there will be a single tenant on SIPRnet, and DISA will build, control, operate, and maintain that tenant. Everybody will have access, and you'll be able to get in it and that type of stuff, but there will be a single tenant on SIPRnet in the IL6 environment. With that being said, what you know of today is appmail.mil, that's hosted by DISA in the DISA DEX. We are moving that hosting location to the DoD 365 joint tenant, and that mail will be hosted inside the Office 365 environment. The Army is moving their mail out of DISA hosted, whether it's on-prem or in the Office 365 environment. They're moving their mail to be hosted inside the Army tenant. So the Army is going back to the old days of what you know as AKO, where the Army is the service provider for the us.army.mil namespace for email. Any questions?
No question, Sarah, but I did want to add to it because I've been sitting in the licensing when you were talking about the licensing. So for in the Army aspect, we've just completed, we've got 3 actual COAs in place for licensing of different, and it's about to be pushed up to the Army Decision Board, where you got Major General Pugh, and then it's going to go up to the Vice Chair to make the decision on the different licenses. And believe it or not, the different COAs start by COA 1 is just giving everybody a license in regards to if you have a DE account. COA 2 is removing all the users that are not active within the last 12 to 18 months and then license just those. COA 3 is basically giving 980,000, I think it was 980,000 licenses, and then anything above that, people will not get a license. And when I say a license, that means email. So there's going to be people that's, if we go with COA 3, they will not get an email account. So, those are the different COAs that's being pushed up right now. I think the majority are trying to go with COA 2 because it actually makes more sense, because the Army only purchased so many licenses apparently, and so they're trying to budget and save money. Instead of going with actual requirements saying everybody needs an email account, they're going to say, okay, because Microsoft won't break out just email. Your licenses, you have to have Teams basically, or not Teams, but the Microsoft suite. So anyway, that's what's happening right now. May 25th, I think, is when that decision is actually going to be made and final. It's one of the boards that they're pushing up for that. Another statement was in regards to the Power BI. Now, I think Power BI desktop is going to be pushed out throughout the Army's tenant, but Power BI, the enterprise, being able to actually develop and be able to do more, that actually is going to require your commands to purchase licenses through chess. I think that's my understanding. I don't know much about the Power because I know Power Apps and Power Automate is also being pushed out. But Power BI, just the desktop, just being able to use within, I might be a little wrong there, but I know Power BI as an enterprise and being able to develop Power web apps or whatever in that nature will have to be purchased. I think I pretty much talked enough there. Over.
Yep, I'm tracking. And just for the group, so what of @mail.mil DE hosted today, DISA has a decision brief next week to provide that sunset date of when we're going to sunset DE hosted on-prem, which means we're going to set a sunset date, and the user base has to get their mail out, whether they're going to migrate to the IL5 environment in any of the tenants, doesn't matter. From a DISA perspective, we don't care. If the customer base continues to say they want it and forces it, and this is where I like Chris's Culp's buying power, as the user base inside DE goes down, the price of mailboxes go up because you're not spreading the cost across the board. Yes, we'll shut down pods and some other things, but those that want to continue to stay in there, the cost of your mailboxes will continue to grow in the aspect of price. So what today is like $4.13 or whatever. That mailbox may go up to $35. I don't know. I don't quote me on anything I'm saying because I'm not in the financial side of DISA by any means. But it's economies of scale. If you want it, you're gonna have to pay for it. So my recommendation is get the mail and everything out of DE and into the Office 365 environment, so no one becomes a disadvantaged user, because they will. Hosting mail on-prem and not inside the cloud, not being inside any of the IL5 environment tenants, they are disadvantaged users. There's no doubt about it, i.e. you won't be able to get into Teams because you don't have an account inside any of the IL5 stuff. So that'll be taking place next week. So there'll be more to come. Now, that does not mean that we are sunsetting DEE on CyberNet, and that won't happen until after the IL6 environment is stood up on CyberNet. So I know we're coming up on the hour. I don't have anything right this second from a question perspective. But if anybody has anything, I can talk as long as my boss does not come and get me, because I'm working something else at this point in time. So I am open. 7th IDG6, all for it.
Hey, Chief. This is Chief Gonzalez. So, yeah, I posed that question in there as well for as far as like MPE, since a lot of the techs out there were at the tactical level. And so my question would be MPE being standardized across not just for Army ground forces, but across the joint services. And is there a common solution or an MPE flavor that's going to be made so that we'll tie in all these coalition and joint forces in the future? And is Microsoft going to be a part of that at all? That was my question, Chief.
So MPE and the aspect of that, it's all about the data, right? And it's data standards of sharing information between the different SecRels. There will be a piece of that. So when IL6 is built, I'm going to be interested to see how that's actually built out. I am not sure from an MPE perspective. I would love to see from an Army perspective that they pump that requirement into the Air Force because they're the MPE executive agent. I mean, from a DISA standpoint, 100%, we don't disagree with you at all. But we don't own that program anymore. I really wish we did.
Thanks, Chief. Yeah, I understand.
Marcus says, without getting too far into the technical discussion, what preventative measures are being discussed with regards to data spillages? Data spillages as in what, Marcus? Be a little more specific.
My apologies, sir. No, I was just wondering, so traditionally, if there is a data spillage, it's localized and handled at usually at the installation level, and then those affected. With us moving into a larger container, is there an expected impact on a larger group based off of where data resides? Over.
When you're so when you're saying spillage, so say somebody sends a classified document across
Yes, sir.
the internet.
Yes, sir.
So really, the only thing that we're changing. So think about it, the only thing you're actually changing, and it's done today, is you're changing where the actual core data is stored, and it's moving. And I'll use Defensive Rise email as an example. It's moved from on-prem as an enterprise service provider, being hosted off-prem in a commercial. I would say a DoD commercial, an IL5 DoD commercial cloud. But it'll still be cleaned in the same manner inside that environment. It's Exchange online instead of Exchange on-prem. So the tenant owners will do the Exchange side, but the individual customer owner on that side, if the mail was opened inside the Outlook client, you'll have to do some cleanup there because of how that mail is pulled down to the OST in that aspect. But if it's opened, if it's read in the web view and not downloaded, then there won't be anything because you won't have any residual. You should not have any residual on the client from a web perspective only of how it interfaces. But if it comes into the actual client aspect of it, then there is residual on the client. So you'll have to do the localized cleanup like you do today.
Understood. Thank you. I guess I kind of sort of made a little challenging to understand. I was just wondering if there was a larger impact because it is an off-prem, but thank you for that clarification, sir.
Yeah, not really from a larger impact perspective. The cleanup and the Exchange side is about the same. So I don't know what Netcom's going to charge you guys for that. I hope they've got a billing cycle out.
Probably the same money they decided to save when they transferred from the AT&T to Netcom.
Yeah. Okay. G6, back to you.
Any outstation officers have any more questions? Go ahead and wait a few seconds.
I know I put it in chat just to let anybody know if they, I've been all over this Army 365 stuff, for a while now. And so if anybody needs to be part of there's like 7 or 8 different meetings through the week and different IPTs for Teams, for email, for SharePoint. So if you're interested in getting involved, send me an email and I'll add you to the IPTs, and that way you can stay on top of it. Over.
Hey, Chris, you don't need to throw that out there. That was a long time ago about being a drill sergeant. Hey, but on that, right? So as you get into your new tenant with us.army.mil, if you'll send me your actual contact info for your login, I assume it's going to be the same as your DE. Once you get in, or let me know you get in, I will add you to the DoD Signal Cyber, the same group that we have on Facebook that's out there from a naming convention. I've already got the group built inside the IL5 environment. I'll add you to it for free flow of information. The group is open, so anyone can join. It's not just warrants. This is wide open, just for sharing of information and or issues. And there's another technical one for those that are close to the tenant configurations and will want to raise issues that you're seeing. We have I started it with the warrants in the Marine Corps, the Navy, the U.S. Coast Guard, but I don't have any of the other warrants from like the Army and some of the senior DISA technical staff that control our tenant. So you can bounce ideas and everything else like that. So Charles, I will add you once I get connected with you to that, so you can see all the different internal workings and or questions.
Yeah, just to add on that as well, because it's confusing right now for a lot of people inside the Army, because like they call it the SIP. So if anybody hears that, the SIP is what's used inside the IL5 environment, which, like mine ends with us.army.mil. But if you're on the UC, it's going to end with usa.army.mil. And so it's a little bit confusing. So if I have the global federated, what was it called?
GFUD.
Global Federated User Directory that
Yep.
can tell you what tenants you're in. So if anybody needs, actually, I'll put that link in this chat when I get to it. But you can go in there and look at your profile and tell what tenant you're in. But yeah, so we can get hooked up there. Over.
Yeah, no problem. And just so you know, everything in USA.army.mil is going away. That tenant will shut down. So the us.army.mil is the one that's there. I don't have anything else, but I'm more than happy to stay on and do show and tell. It's up to the G6 if you want to continue to record, but I'll do some show and tell kind of stuff until my boss pulls me out of this office.
I'd say keep going, Chief. If you want to show us what you.
All right, I'm gonna start sharing my screen. So exactly what Chris was talking about, GFUD. So I posted a link down in the chat for GFUD. So to log in, you log in, access self-access, log in. This is where you would put your credentials. Mine stay with @mail.mil just because that is my SIP, because we DISA retained the IL5 or retained the namespace for @mail.mil. And it's CAC authenticate. And then All right. So you can change your themes, everything up here, dark theme, default, humoristic, whatever software. I chose dark, just easier on my eyes as I get older. So what Charles was talking about, account info, and so it lists all your account info. This is all derived from DMDC and or IDSS pumps into here. GFUD, the Global Federated User Directory, is starting for access with the Office 365 suites, but is going to become one of the authoritative ICAM, identity managed source locations for access to DoD information globally, no matter where you sit. All right, so there's been questions on the Facebook group of, hey, how do I manage distribution lists and that kind of stuff? So when you move into the new environment, distribution lists aren't what they used to be inside of the inside the normal Exchange environment. Distribution lists aren't necessarily in the new environment. So we have developed a way to still modify the old distribution list from GFUD. So there's a couple that I'm managers of. So say I want to modify one of the distribution lists. Manage. Just click on the little what is it? Sprocket, and then here's the owners of this group. I don't even know which one I did. This is the DISA group, DL. So right now, myself and Chief Potter are the owners of the group. It's a DISA group, and if I want to add somebody, it's on this over here. So if I want to add somebody, add member, type in their name, BYRT, search. And so I just select who I want to. Oh, by the way, there he is. Add selected member. Operation successful, done. Distribution list is updated. So any owner of a distribution group can do that, and you can add different owners. It doesn't matter. Any questions? All right, we'll leave it there. Just different links, that kind of stuff. This is where you'll start to do, as DISA continues to work with multi-factor authentication into the Office 365 environment. We are working that right now. So as long as we get the approvals from DoD CIO, you will be able to authenticate from your personal devices into the different services in your tenant with MFA, with username and password and MFA. And so we're prepping this right now. That's what that looks like. Some things. So I use web access for mail a lot. So when we're talking distribution lists from an Exchange perspective are going away, and if we're not gone away, Exchange Online deals a lot with groups and that type of stuff. So you don't have to request somebody to create a distribution list or anything else. Every user can do that themselves by creating a new group. They just create the group right here. It's instantaneous. You create the group and you're done. So private, only members can see what's inside, or you can make it public. Anyone in the organization can see. Most of the ones I've made are all private, and leave it at that. What's interesting about that is, with that in mind, the teams in which I create, all the teams I've created have all been done by, the teams in which I've created have all been done by creating them from the Exchange Online group. So if I modified this group here, this is the DoD Signal Cyber one that I was talking about. If I modify this group and add a member, and as you can see, all these guest ones are from other tenant personnel. Once I modify this group right here is modified. It just happens automatically. There's nothing, you don't have to modify this one to go back and modify the other one. With that in mind, once I create the team, once I've created this team here, at the exact same time, a SharePoint site collection is created. And I haven't done anything with this, but who has access to the site collection are the exact same members that have access to the Exchange Online group and the team. And if I want to add a member here, it updates the other two at the same time. And this is all at the user level. No admin permissions are needed to do any of this. Any questions?
Did you say you set up the group in the Outlook first before the teams, or you set up the teams first? I'm bouncing back and forth. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so order of march in which I did it, and I played with it a couple different ways. I did the Exchange Online group first, and then I created the team from the Exchange Online group. It just created the team and then it immediately created the the SharePoint site collection at the same time. So you only have to name it once, and then it's all click, point, and click after that.
Great, thanks.
No problem. Marlon was asking in reference to VDI Desktop as a Service, Title 10. So I know the Air Force has that. DISA is looking at it as a service. We have not done that specifically yet. DISA is the service provider for the Fourth Estate organizations. We are pulling all of them underneath. So our desktop client bases will reach somewhere in the 450,000 desktop clients for an organization as the service provider. I don't know where the Army is. I don't know if Netcom is looking at that as a service provider for the Army to be able to do that. I can't speak on behalf. I know DISA is moving in that direction to be that service provider, i.e. to give that VDI desktop experience. My old brother Josh, having long-term, how do you manage them long-term by duty positions so the incoming first sergeant has access to all the same stuff the old one did? So Josh, so you set that up. You can set that up in the aspect of, so you set up in teams, right? So you set the team up, and I'll use the example of what you're just talking about. So warrant officers for DISA. So the warrant officers for DISA right now, and I'll use that example, manage the team. So right now, because we're all warrants in DISA and it's only for DISA, I created the team and we're all owners. So no matter who comes in and out, they can do this. That created the site collection, and when the new first sergeant comes in, you just give him access, and then he has complete access to everything else. Does that help answer the question, Josh? Josh, if you got anything more in detail, I know you'll walk circles around me on some of these things. Just got to remember our time in 75th and when you were in 375. So just let's talk offline, and I can probably help you on a little bit. Isaac, IDAM, BYOD. So right now, BYOD, from a department stance, they're going through testing from an MDM perspective. DISA is working 3 different MDM solutions: Mobile Iron, BlackBerry UEM, and Hypori. Mobile Iron configs and everything should be done today, and we're testing with personal devices into the environment, and that's where we're going with the username and password. So we are doing some internal testing and providing those results to the DoD CIO. So it's not for mass usage. It is a very, very small piece of how we are controlling the data in and out with about 5 to 10 people inside the agency.
Yeah, the Army was going through the same process, but once we moved tenants, they kind of put that on the back burner until we get the rest of the transition going. I will also add, when you were talking about this setup here, the initial migration is going to be mostly for Army is just going to be teams, you know, and then the next phase will be the email, and then SharePoint for units will be the third phase. So I know the SharePoint, or what you're talking about, is automatically created. It's not a unit SharePoint.
Correct.
But I don't think all this is not going to really go into effect until, you know, everybody gets both teams and their email migrated. So it might not work right off the bat once it gets transferred over.
I agree. So one of the key things for the full benefit and everything else will be the email piece of that. So, hey team, my boss is knocking, so I'm gonna have to go. If you have anything else specific or anything else, float me a note. I'll get back to you within the day. If anything, hey, I got it. I'm working on it. But other than that, thank you guys for allowing me to speak. And I'll continue to flow information out bi-weekly or every 3 weeks, whatever. As COVID's starting to slow down, everything is becoming a lot more slower in the aspect of major changes and everything else. But that's it.
Hey, Chief. This is Chief Gonzalez. So on behalf here of us in 7IDG6, I just want to thank you for taking the time to share all this information with us and these regular DISA level updates that you keep sending out. We all appreciate it, and as we're ultimately affected, you know, at the tactical level by all these changes. For everyone here, I want to thank everybody for dialing in and making our warrant officer team stronger. Yeah, thanks again, Chief. And any more questions in the chat, I'll go ahead and pass them off to you.
Yeah, no problem. And just for everybody that's there, I mean, pass the word. If you want me to talk in reference to anything in specific and in detail, I know before COVID, a year before COVID, I hosted an event up here at Fort Meade for 2 days. I don't mind doing an hour here, an hour there, and anything very specific. We can go in detail. I get the program manager, that type of stuff, to give in detail stuff. If you float me the ideas of anything that you might want, I'll set those up individually outside of anything 7th ID. I'll set it up, and I know how to get in contact with the total Army warrant force. So that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Chief. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to end stop recording. Everyone take care and have a great weekend.